Daniel Carter's life was at the center of a story that would go down in lottery history. When he won a $100 million jackpot, everything changed overnight. Surrounded by TV cameras, journalists, and congratulatory calls, it didn't take long for him to realize that the fortune he had won brought not only happiness, but also fear and anxiety. At first, everything seemed perfect. Daniel quickly moved into a luxurious mansion, indulging in expensive cars and exotic vacations around the world. Everyone admired him, and old friends and acquaintances flocked to him. But over time, the world he had entered began to lose its charm. His family, his old friends, and even strangers constantly pressured him for money. Every time he gave, people demanded more. One evening, while alone, Daniel received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was strange and hushed. "You've gained wealth, but you've lost time. The clock has started ticking," it said, before abruptly hanging up. Daniel couldn't make sense of it, but the feeling that something was wrong began to grow. The next morning, when he looked into the mirror, he noticed his hair graying and fine wrinkles forming around his eyes. He saw an older version of himself staring back. At that moment, he realized his wealth wasn't just aging him physically, it was robbing him of time and happiness. Soon after, Daniel began to feel that everything around him was falling apart. Despite living in a beautiful home, he felt a deep loneliness. The bright, glittering world he had entered only seemed to bring emptiness and loss. His old friends began to distance themselves, and even the ones closest to him turned their backs, accusing him of prioritizing money over relationships. His best friend left, telling him that he had let him down and that wealth had changed him. This blow was harder for Daniel to take than anything else. Though his wealth had given him everything, it had also brought loneliness and loss. One day, he took a decisive step and went back to the shop where he had bought the ticket. The elderly shopkeeper looked at him with knowing eyes. Without a word, the man simply nodded and said, "You were never ready to bear this weight. Your only salvation is to return the curse where it belongs." In that moment, Daniel understood. The things the ticket had brought him, the wealth, the luxury, came at a price. Instead of passing the curse on to someone else, he realized he needed to free himself from it. He decided to take the ticket and end this burden once and for all. Thinking of how fire destroys everything, Daniel knew the ticket had to be burned. By doing so, he hoped to rid himself of the curse. That night, as he held the ticket one last time, his entire life flashed before his eyes. The wealth had brought him nothing but loneliness and fear. As he threw the ticket into the flames, a wave of relief washed over him, as if the weight of his troubles had been lifted. The next morning, he woke to find his reflection in the mirror youthful again. His hair was darker, his eyes brighter, and his face smooth with the freshness of youth. However, his fortune was gone. The luxurious life he had known was now a thing of the past. But for the first time in years, he felt a true sense of peace. The curse had been lifted, and Daniel had learned the painful truth about the dangers of wealth. He now understood that happiness didn't come from money, but from peace and cherishing the people around him. The wealth he had once so desperately pursued had brought him nothing but emptiness. His real wealth, he realized, lay in the love and time he could share with those who mattered most. Daniel had lost his fortune, but he had found true wealth in the simplest things, a life of peace, free from the pressure of materialism and loneliness. And in that, he discovered a richer life than he ever imagined.